peanut gallery was, do you know what the peanut gallery was? You're too young also. Okay. Yeah. Do you know what the peanut gallery was? What was it? What was it?
Maybe I don't know.
No, it was a TV show with a cowboy puppet named Howdy Doody. And the peanut gallery was all the kids sitting out there watching.
We didn't get TV till I was a teenager.
So they had that. Well, that was maybe the first day TV was invented, when you were a teenager. All right, we're live and we're chatting. God bless you. Thank you for watching this. We're going to continue in our discussion of the 12 wisdoms from the book of Proverbs. Just to iterate, we're going to look at what Solomon has to say. Proverbs chapter 1, verse 1. What follows, he says, are going to be the Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. And then he lists 12 kinds of wisdom. Now, you don't get this just reading the Bible in the English version, but I'm going to give you the Hebrew words, beginning with verse 2. To know wisdom and instruction, two very particular words in Hebrew. We'll be talking about these tonight. Chokmah, the word for wisdom, is chokmah. I'm not going to try to spell it for you, but that's the way it is. The word for instruction, that's really a bad translation. The Hebrew word is musar, and it means not just instruction like someone talking to a class. It means correction, to be willing to be corrected, and then to perceive the words of understanding. That's a good word in English. I like that word, understanding. The Hebrew word is binah. Binah. You don't have to memorize these Hebrew words. I just want to show you that there are 12 very distinct words. Now, binah is understanding. What does understanding mean? Does it mean that it stands under you, this kind of wisdom, to keep you up? Or do you stand under this wisdom? Binah. I've always wondered how the word understand came to be in English. We're either standing under something or it's standing under us if we have understanding. Do you understand what I'm asking? All right. Binah. Those are the three we're going to talk about tonight if I get to them, but let's continue to list them. After that, to receive the instruction of wisdom. Well, those two words, wisdom and instruction, have already been used in this verse, but in verse 2. But in the Hebrew, they're very different. It's to receive the sakal of chokmah. Now, sakal is it means prudent behavior, and we'll be talking about that one, especially, but not tonight. And then also to receive justice and judgment and equity. All three of those are good. Listen to them in Hebrew: tzedek and mishpat and the mesharim. You can see that Solomon's using some very distinct words. Some of these words, like wisdom and instruction, are repeated in the English, but in the Hebrew, he's making them very, very different. They come out to be 12 kinds of wisdom. And then to give subtlety to the simple. The word for subtlety is orma, and it literally means shrewdness. Shrewdness. And then, and to the young man, knowledge and discretion. The word for knowledge is da'ath, unlike any of the others that you've heard. And discretion is mezimah. You see what I'm saying? You don't have to learn these words, but they seem so repetitive in English. But in the Hebrew, they are 12 different words. And that's what I want to focus on. 12 different kinds of wisdom. A wise man will hear and will increase in learning, special word for learning in Hebrew, lekah, and a man of understanding in English will attain unto wise counsels. Actually, in the Hebrew, he will attain to become a sought after and wise counselor. The point Solomon is making is that you shouldn't go trying to counsel people, offering your counsel to people. Let me give you my advice. Let me give you my counsel. No, if you've got the goods, they'll come to you and ask for your counsel and your opinion. Takbulah, being a wise counselor, is the last in the list of 12. And before you can attain unto being a wise counselor, you have to have proven to people that you're good in all the previous 11 wisdoms. You have to be a person who has demonstrated righteousness, tzedek. You have demonstrated musar. You've been corrected. You're not incorrigible, you are corrigible. That's a fancy word. It means correctable. You can take a rebuke. Well, all of them. You've got to have been demonstrating these to people before anyone will see you as somebody that can give them good words to help their lives or their situations. Now, you know, very few people want to admit that they're not wise. Solomon writes about this in a lot of the Proverbs. A fool is known for the multitude of his words, but he has never proven himself in wisdom. He'll talk all day long and tell you everything he knows, and actually the more you learn from a fool, the stupider you are. You actually get negative education. Solomon will say things like that over and over in the Proverbs. And in the King James, he uses the word fool a lot, meaning someone who has no understanding, no wisdom. We read Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount. He tells us not to use the word fool. If you call your brother a fool, you know, that's wrong to do. So I don't throw the word around lightly. But in the Old Testament, it just means someone who is completely unproven in his thinking. Now, as our story opens that I'm going to read to you, this is from my first book in the trilogy about King Solomon's life. As I mentioned to you, this is another chapter. And I'll call this The Seafarer. King Solomon now has a conference. The kings of the earth have been coming once a year to sit at his great table. There are also tribal leaders from all over Israel. I want to remind you that Solomon will be the very last king to rule all 12 tribes of Israel. As soon as he dies, the 12-tribe coalition falls apart, and it's never put back together again. Solomon's trying desperately to hold it all together, and he's got tribal leaders, clan chiefs from all over the 12 tribes, family heads. He's also got men representing kings from all over the international region. And we're told that Solomon has built together a diplomatic coalition or even empire. It's a friendly empire stretching from all nations, from the river Euphrates all the way across northern Arabia and Syria and Lebanon and down through the land of the Philistines and across the Sinai to the river of Egypt. And all of these people come to Solomon's conferences that last for several days. What we're coming in on is the last day of this particular conference. Nobody knows it will be the last conference, for Solomon will die in my book a few weeks after this. But he has decided to teach on the 12 wisdoms. Now he calls in somebody that he thinks can tell 12 good stories about each one of these things. And Solomon is the only Israeli king to ever build a navy. In fact, he builds two. One in the Mediterranean, sailing as far as Tarshish, which is in Spain, near the Pillars of Hercules opening into the Atlantic Ocean. Solomon will send trade ships out there across the Mediterranean, and it'll take 3 years for them to return. And that's because they do a lot of trading along the way and map making and so forth. He also has built a navy down south on the Red Sea at a place called Ezion Geber, which is at the Gulf of Aqaba. You know, the Red Sea comes up and it splits into two gulfs with the Sinai between them. And Solomon builds his navy at the tip of one of those two gulfs. And they sail all the way out into the Indian Ocean. And those ships that sail south down through the Red Sea, they're the ones that reach the Horn of Africa and have made contact with the famous Queen of Sheba, who now comes to meet Solomon. And so she's there. And I've just gone over the 12 wisdoms. And dear Sister Laura, you can just leave that up if you want to while I'm talking. But Solomon now, he's been talking about a lot of these things to these kings on this day. And now he changes the format of the meeting. My friends, Solomon announces, I have a presentation for you. A simple matter to illustrate these processes of wisdom. I'd like for you to welcome a servant of Israel whose years of service demonstrate this. He turns to the door across the room to his right. A man enters. He is a master shipwright and seaman of the Navy of Israel. He is of near age to the kings, but he's more hard-bitten in face and hands. His eyes are deep set in crease-lined sockets. He is clad in clean, white, loose linen. His pants gather at the ankles. His tunic bunches into a blue sash at the waist. The blue turban of a chief sailor wraps his head. A sheathed sword hangs tightly against his left hip. He approaches the table and bows militarily before the king. He turns to the seated guests and bows again. He comes to attention with feet spread and hands clasped into the small of his back. Solomon steps to his side. Gentlemen and lady, he nods at the Queen of Sheba. This is Commander Shammah ben Puah, an officer of Israel's Royal Navy. He has served both as captain of my flagship and as a member of the International Council of Marine Advisors to Kings. I have asked him to come today that he might tell us his story, how he came to his station. Know that he was born to a poor farmer, one Puah ben Reuben of Gilead, in a region far from any body of water. If you could look at where Gilead was, it's east of the Jordan, and it's where Sodom and Gomorrah used to be, and it is semi-barren, and once you get 20 miles past the Jordan, you've got to catch every bit of rainwater that ever falls and keep it, because there won't be anything else except the Dead Sea, which you can't drink. Let's see, I lost my place. It doesn't matter. Far from any body of water other than the gullied wadis of the eastern plains. He stands before you now, a seaman of great experience, having sailed to the far reaches of 2 oceans. How a common dirt scratcher became a sailor and later moved up to a commander's position is a living narrative of the processes of Chokmah from Musar all the way down to Takbulah, and you will hear it. Let me skip over some other stuff I've got Solomon saying. He releases, he takes the sailor's hand. Shammah ben Puai has taken the wisdom journey. He was visited by the Lady Chokmah, and he chose to follow her. That's Lady Wisdom. She took him into the lessons of Musar, revelations of Bina, instructions of Sakal, a firm stance of Tzedek, or righteousness, the discernments of Mishpat, the balances of Mesharim, the subtleties of Orma, the acquisitions of Da'ath, and the foresights of Mezimah. These qualities built in him the love of Lekah and brought him at last to the high station of Takbulah that he now holds masterfully. Every man's path should, in some way, be like his in life. He releases the sailor's hand and steps back to his chair. Now, Commander, tell us your story. This is the first story. It's called Chokmah, or wisdom itself. Now, once again, don't worry about these Hebrew words I'm yelling. You don't have to learn them. You'll never have a use for them, except to understand in these series of readings that these are very distinct kinds of wisdom. And until you gain the first, you'll never gain the second. And until you gain the second, you'll never gain the third. They come in a natural series. Shammah, the sailor, nods to them and faces the assembly. Thank you, my king, for the honor. May Yehovah, as God, Jehovah, grant that I speak well. It is true that I am of humble birth and raised among herdsmen in a landlocked region of grassy hills, a few stands of thin timber, and scattered stone outcroppings. I had no knowledge of the sea, and indeed had never even thought of it. I had little awareness that it even existed. I had neither seen a boat nor met a fisherman. The only water I had known was in the ancient well my ancestors had excavated, and in the small rill, tiny stream, running through one edge of our land for a few months of the year, fed by the spring rains. I had never tasted the flesh of fish. In my 15th year, the king's men came to our village in Reuben, Gilead. They were conscripting young men to go to a far place called Lebanon to hew timber from the cedar forests of those mountains. The timber was to be sent to another far place called Jerusalem and used for construction of Yehovah's temple. My father agreed to send me along for the service of God and our King. For a boy who had never traveled beyond sight of his home, it was an undreamed of adventure. I was joined to a workforce of 2,000 marching northwest. We crossed the Jordan, the most water I had yet seen in my life. Later, from higher ground, we saw in the distant north the glimmering expanse of the lake they call Galilee. I thought this must be the ocean I had heard tell of, but we marched on past the sight of it. In 2 days' time, we crossed the ascending plain and found, stretching before us, the great blue sea, the Mediterranean. The sea, gentlemen. I cannot describe to you the enormity of surprise I felt when first beholding it. The immense and unending vastness of salt water, its churning liquid hills and valleys, rolling blue and splashing white. I arrived upon the beach with other homebred lads like myself and stood gazing, stunned. I might have remained thus for hours had not the order come for us to actually embark upon it. They divided us into groups of 12s and packed us into wooden barks, small boats, lining the quays at Tyre, a quay that's a pier, a dock. They put oars in our hands and told us that we were to power these crafts against wind and current all the way north to Zidon. I took my place facing astern, grasped my oar shaft, and learned to row in rhythm to the helmsman's call. Within an hour, my hands were blistered and bleeding. I was sickened by the unfamiliar heaving motion of the water and its fishy smell. More than once I retched upon my knees and feet. We were made to keep at it for a day and a night, the endless line of boats carrying men and tools. Despite my suffering, I kept watching the amazing sea, stretching away portside to its horizon, and the coastline sliding past us at starboard side. I was fascinated. At last we came to the long stone quays at Zidon. They hurried us out of the boats to be fed. Most of us could not walk or even stand well. The Tyrian means people from Tyre. The Tyrian boatmen laughed at us for it. They spoke a tongue unknown to us, but we knew from their manner and gestures what they thought of us. It was all a bad idea to them to try to teach Israelite landsmen how to be seaborne sailors. The very notion that Israel might form a navy was absurd to them, and they did not hide their disdain. Despite their audacity and contempt, I had respect for them. I watched those Tyrian sailors in awe. 3 of their great ships were anchored in the harbor. These fearless men, agile as spiders, swung high among the ropes and spars of those big ships. They had been to the ends of the world on those very vessels. What it must be like, I thought, to construct those long, lap-straked hulls, sleek-lined and graceful as swans, tall, sparred, and winged with gaff-rigged sails, to take them sliding out through the swells and veils of the infinite sea, to go to islands beyond the horizon, to coasts of distant lands, to trade for strange goods with people of unknown tongues and curious ways. Oh, I felt the yearning ache in my heart, a strange longing to enter that other world, that other life. Yes, and I noticed how carelessly those seamen perched along the gunwales of a surging rowboat, pulling out to one of those big ships, to lift its anchors and hoist its sails and to drive with the wind out into the unknown kingdom of the sea. How they laughed and sang together some old shanty of their tongue and of their ship or their life aboard ship, some old song as old as the sea itself, and cadenced with the rhythms of the waves, and timed to their rowing as they pulled away. Oh, the new hunger began to gnaw in me. The desire to be among them on their embarkation, to be like them, to possess their reckless abilities and sea graces. I feared I could have little stamina for it. My knees trembled, my back burned, my hands bled, my stomach churned. My body wanted no more of boats. But my heart, gentlemen, my spirit and soul, the deepest parts of me wanted to plunge in and swim out, though I did not even know yet how to swim, to catch the stern of their yawl or small rowboat, and to be pulled in over the transom, to be taken with them out to that ship. And this, Solomon interrupts, the desire to become something new, something beyond the experiences of your upbringing. This newfound longing for the sea and the ship as you had never touched or imagined. This was wisdom's, Chokmah's, visitation upon you. For this is what wisdom does. She takes you by the hand and proposes a new life, the entrance to a new world of new ways and new skills. Old things pass away, all things become new. A new living possesses you. Yes, I know it, Solomon continues. I remember the first tug of the enchantment to be something other and to set forth into some splendid newness, to learn all it might entail. Then, oh seaman, what came next for you? I can tell you before you speak it. Hokmah immediately takes you to instruction, musar, correction, to strip away the old ways and habits that will not fit the new life. It's the painful next step, the difficult price that few are willing to pay for the rewards to come. So, tell us of Musar. Next chapter, he's going to go into another story of how he learned to be corrected as he began to learn the shipbuilder's craft. Is this interesting, or am I being too wordy? All right, I'll continue. Stop me at any time. Say, just cross your arms like Sid's doing now and sigh and say, boring, and we'll go into something else. Shammah steps forward. So they let us rest a while. Then they marched us inland from the coast and up into the Lebanon mountains. There we were divided into crews, each under a Zidonian overseer. He put iron axes in our hands and taught us how to fell the tall trees. We set to the work. You know, this boy's not raised near any big forest. He's from the Gilead Hills. So he's never cut down a tree before, nor most of these guys. So this guy's teaching them. Within minutes, the axes began to blunt, yet our taskmaster let us work on and on. At last, our blows had little effect upon the wood. We sweated and strained at fruitless labor. He ordered us to stop. He chided us loudly for fools and asses, ignorant, worthless landsmen or herdsmen who knew not how to keep iron sharp. He led us down to a stream and told us each to wade in and find 2 flat gray stones. Before ye may be woodworkers, he cried, you must be metal workers, to know how to maintain edges on tools. Yea, and before metal, ye must know stone. Drop that one, he told me, and find another. No, fool, not that one. Get another. Yes, like this, not a round one, numbskull, a small flat stone. Yes, now 2 of them. The gray ones, not the brown. Now make hones of them. You know not how? You grind them together, ignorant Israelites. Yes, keep them wet. Rub them each against each other. Flatten them. Keep at it if your hands blister and bleed, simpletons. Yes, each man must have 2 honing stones. You'll make them and keep them with you at all times. I don't know if any of you have ever sharpened a knife on a stone, but learning how to hone, it takes a special kind of rock to make those hones out of. Oh yes, now some of you are dropping your large stones and finding smaller ones. You grasp the idea at last, don't you? You there, you prefer those hard black stones? Well, go ahead if you will, but no iron will sharpen on them. No? All right, get rid of them and find the gray. Now get to rubbing. When you think you've made good flat surfaces, bring them to me. So we passed hours squatting in the water and working those rocks back and forth. We discovered how to put handfuls of sand between the stones and rub them until the sand ground to powder, and then work in a new wet handful. The stones flattened slowly. From time to time, the Zidonian returned to rebuke us. After a half day of this toil, we each had produced a pair of flat-surfaced stones we would keep for honing our tools. The one, he told us, would be used only for copper, and the other for iron. We were brought up to the trees again, to our axes, saws, and wedges. Axes first, he said. So we spent a half hour learning to grind the edge of the axe blade in circles on the stone until it was bright and clean and keen. Now keep them this way, he yelled, and get to work. We were glad to be swinging the axes again. We delighted at the flying chips shearing away with each strike of the eager edges. We delighted, 50 or 60 blows I found, and I had to stop and give the blade a quick honing. Then it was ready to bite wood again. I glanced up and saw the overseer grin. For weeks we worked, lopping branches and piling logs of 9 kinds of trees. He taught us the differences of those woods and explained how the ship's parts were made from each. The 2 heavy hardwoods, oak and ash, were to become spars and masts, and any forks we took from oak trunks would be sawn for curved hull ribbings. 3 straight-grained lightwoods, cedar, fir, and boxwood, were for planking on topside decks. When I first wrote this, I put in all the Hebrew names for these different kinds of woods, and then I realized we have very similar, not exactly the same species here in America, but close enough just to use our words for these trees. Cedar, fir, and boxwood for planking on topside decks. 4 gnarly oil woods, pine, cypress, balsam, and olive, were to be underside pieces, the stem, keel, hull, and wet planking for the lower hulls underwater. Little did I realize how those highland woods were to become my world and my life. We carted those timbers down to the coast again and again. Each time we noted how the shipwrights there worked the mountain-grown lumber into graceful straight hulls and spar-hung decks of ships that would plow the measureless waters. And less did I imagine that I soon would sail upon one of them, carried out and away upon a ship whose timbers I myself had helped to cut and shape. For the time being, it was my only business to know the natures of these woods and the metals we employed to hew and shape them. I became skilled at sharpening copper or iron, axes, wedges, saws, and chisels. I was taken from the felling crew and placed downhill with the sawyers. They set me to fine honing their carving tools. I felt I had been demoted and rebuked, yet I kept at the blades until I could be depended upon to quickly produce consistent, razor-fine edges. My new teacher was an even harder taskmaster than the felling boss had been. Sometimes he rapped my forearms with his rod when I held the chisel awry or off angle at the sharpening stone. Just so, no higher, no lower, he would say, and take the chisel from my hand and patiently rub it in 20 circles upon the stone, removing the burr I had formed on its edge. I don't know if you know what a burr is. When you sharpen a knife, if you don't turn the knife over every 10 strokes or so to sharpen the other side, a little curve that you can't really see forms on the sharp edge and kind of curls up. That's a burr. And man, you think your knife is sharp, and then you find it won't cut anything well. Well, you've got a burr curled up on that fine edge, and you've got to turn it over and sharpen that off and straighten it out again. And it can happen either way. So getting really sharp stuff, well, he gets a lot of correction for this. Then he would have me feel the sharp edge he had made, and then he would blunt it against his brass hammer and have me start it all over again. One morning as I set to work, I felt the tap of his rod on my shoulder. "Come," he said, and bring that. I took the chisel I was sharpening along with my whetstones and followed him to one of the milling sheds. The milling boss, you know what milling is. It's where you take logs and you split them into boards, planks. It's known as milling. And how did they do it without big rotary saws back in those days? They had to do it all Abraham Lincoln style by splitting. And you have to know exactly the kind of wood you're trying to split to know how that split is going to run. It's quite a science. The milling boss said, I'm ordered to the unfortunate task of finding one of you dull-witted Israelites to be instructed to the arts of shaping and planing wood. It's improbable that you'll learn it. Yet your king Solomon has asked it of our Lord King Hiram. I asked if there were any other Israelites selected for this. He nodded, but said they were none of my affair. My only business was to learn from him how to work the wood into pieces that the shipwrights needed. He gave me a brass-banded oak mallet to strike my sharp copper chisel. He had me watch as he, with similar tools and wooden wedges, carefully sheaved off a perfect plank from a log of clear fir. It looked easy enough. He had me try it. I will not burden you men with the mess I made of it, except to say that I received many a rap from his rod as I learned. There are many different ways the grain may run among the knots and twists of a length of wood. I learned how to find the straight splitting line for each kind of timber. If a wedge or chisel were improperly placed, the split could turn awry and the whole log might be ruined. A man could be punished for that. I set myself to master the trick. I suppose I did better than others, for one day the milling boss informed me that he was losing me. He said I had been chosen as one of only 100 Israelites who would now return to the coast for special assignment. I was to be apprenticed in the shipbuilder's craft. I was so excited to hear it that Solomon interrupts him. Your willingness to learn, he says, and if need be, to be admonished and corrected by those Tyrian Zidonian teachers. This was wisdom's subsequential begetting of Musar into your heart. But let's move on. You showed willingness to be corrected, and you have, I believe now, something to tell us about being the impartation of understanding. Well, that's the second one. Can you tell the difference between obeying the call of Chokmah and setting out into a new life and the musar it takes to correct you and have you strip away all your old ideas and bad assumptions? All right, now we're getting into something better. Understanding. Is this enough for everybody, or would you like this third story? I figure if we can do 3 wisdoms every night, we can get through the 12 in a month if you all would like these readings. If not, I'll just open the book of Proverbs and we'll start discussing them one by one. It's okay? All right. Yes, my king, my next apprenticeship was to be very different, a very different way of learning. There is an old Zidonian proverb. 100 taskmasters teach 10,000 men one labor. 10 instructors teach 100 men 100 tasks. But one master teaches one disciple 10,000 skills. In fact, let me go over that again. Depending on who the learner is, if you're one of the 10,000, it'll take 100 overseers to teach 10,000 this one labor you'll learn and do it the rest of your life. What do? Oh, I sweep floors. What else do you do? That's about it. That's all I know. Sweep floors. Well, who taught you that? Oh, I went to floor sweeping college. There were 10,000 of us there. But we only learned one thing. 10 good instructors will choose 100 men and teach them each 100 tasks. So now I know 100 things, but is that as far as I go, or will I put myself under one master? Because a master, if you're ready for it, to get understanding, a true master can teach one good learner 10,000 skills. It describes what I would come to realize about their ways of finding learners for more exquisite work. No more was I to learn as merely one among many workers, all at the same labor, under this shipwright, who was much kinder in manner, yet more demanding of me than the feller and the wood splitter. I was immediately introduced to the many skills of shipcraft. He said that I was to accomplish them all. His orders were to train a selected, willing, able Israelite in the whole art of shipbuilding. It's a place in the Bible where King Solomon is explaining why he went into a deal with King Hiram of Tyre. And he says, we wanted to build a navy, but he says, Israelites don't know anything about building boats. In fact, we don't do much woodwork at all. We build most of our houses out of stone. And wood is only used for a few things. And so I come to you, King Hiram, to teach us shipbuilding. And he says this, he says, for like the Zidonians. And this is Solomon's plan. He's going to go to these foreign masters and get some of his men learning. And by the way, back at that time, shipbuilding was the most difficult. He was charged with the construction of 5 double-reamed cargo ships. Now, you know what reamed means? R-E-M-E-D. Did you ever see Ben a long oar in his hand? And when you see the ship from a distance, you find that there are 3 levels that these guys are rowing. At the top level, their oars are very long. Them shorter length. That's called a trireme ship. 3 oars at every part along each side of it. This an oarsman sits here and another one sits below him. And that's what they're going to be building. It's also going to be sail set. And so it's going to be built for speed. Now he had them, and he had me. He divided 60 craftsmen into 5 crews of 12. Who has been chosen to work from each of you or learn from each of you every skill you can show him. I want you each to teach him all you know. Make a master shipwright of him if you can. Speech well. So I say, show him. His country has no shipwrights, but we will try to give them one. How can it be done? Can one Hebrew learn in one? Can the sea lore we sold to the pharaohs yet took the Egyptians 200 years to master? Not likely. But we now tell or sell the what our craft has risen to. So, boys, let's lay 5 good keels and stems. The sun yellows. My good sirs, I will not bore you. I'll just offer a short list of some aspects of the shipwright's knowledge to give you an idea of its complexities. Well, I'll actually skip over all that reading to you. After I was handed over to the carpenters. By this time they were laying keel for yet 5 new vessels. I had some knowledge of the shapes of keel, keelson, bow stem. The actual forming of these things in full scale multiplied my understanding immensely. Selected beams coupled with scarf joints. You know what a scarf joint is? Of 2 planks together. Always dovetail? Yeah, keyway. Okay. Scarf joint is completely different. I just wondered if you knew. To be filled with stones to specified weight for ballast. Intricately angled cuts were slanted into the keelson to accept ribs, stem, and stern plates. Things I was learning were a closed mystery to anyone excluded from the brotherhood of shipwrights. I began to appreciate more and more the arcane means mysterious. Arcane things kept obscure from most men. Why, just the dual symmetry of the ship, the mirror image mating of each port of each hull lapstrake, and the exact compound angle of its chine, in the selection of woods for spars and masts, in their bend allowance, and in their point of resistance to bending, in the things, a world of understanding opened to me, and this master never commanded me to learn it. He rather allowed me to learn. Ended, you required no more external reprimands. You now had the inner voice. Musar had led you to Bina. You began systems tonight. My dear listener, thank you for coming all the way from Monterey to listen to me read at you. Solomon would have called some word like hokmah. And then correction, where you have to, that's the painful part of wisdom, where you have to be told how wrong you've been about so many. A lot of Proverbs Solomon writes about Musar. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction will drive it far from him. Back, and yet he will not learn. And some will not. There's a long way to go down through the 12 wisdoms. Some won't get through that second one, being corrigible or correctable. But that's very important. And if you can get over that hurdle, why do you think it is that when you're a military inductee, the first thing they do is send you to a boot camp where you're put under a sergeant who belittles you, yells at you, makes fun of you for your mama and girlfriend and how much they love you because you're going to get no love from him, and puts you down, humiliates you completely because he's got to strip away all that arrogance and self-pride and attitude from you before he can put a gun in your hand and begin to teach you what to do in combat. And so usually they put you for a month and a half or a couple of months in boot camp where you're beaten down. You've really got to be pounded to a pulp before they can remake you into a vessel that can be used. So that's the idea of Musar. And there'll be a little bit more about it as we read some of these actual proverbs. But if you will submit to Musar, then Bina opens up to you. And those are the actual skills. When Solomon says, instruct or teach a young man in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. What is Solomon talking about? What's the way the young man should go? Oh, righteousness and church and belief in God. No, Solomon has other terms for those things. And by the way, if it's our job to teach our children all about God, we're going to fail because we don't know all about God yet. We're still learning. If only we could teach our children in the moral and ethical way they should go. That would be wonderful, but we can't do it. We can try. Somebody says, well, if you'll do it, if you'll teach righteousness, when the child is old, the Bible says he will never depart from it. Well, that's crazy. That didn't work for David and his sons. It didn't work for Abraham and Ishmael. It sure didn't work for Solomon and his son Rehoboam. In fact, you look around in this world, it seldom works. That idea of working is the exception, not the rule. Why? Because kids grow up to a certain age and say, Daddy, you've taught me some good things. Mommy, you taught me some good things. But I'm just hearing them from you. I've got to go out and find out myself. And that's what they're going to do. But that's actually not what Solomon was talking about at all. He said, find out what this kid is chosen of God to be. Is he chosen of God to be a pastor, a boat builder, a carpenter, doctor, lawyer, Indian chief, rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief? What is the way he should go in? What joy will God put in him to be his principal career and contribution in life to the community about him? Maybe the way he should go is to be a poet or a musician or a politician or a lawmaker. Find out the way love him enough to find the way he should go. And if you get him started in it with Hokmah, Musar, and then Bina, you'll watch that child. And when he is old, he'll have such a love for his craft, even as an old man, he will never have departed from it. That's what Solomon means, and that's why that is a Bina proverb. It's all about understanding. Praise God. Well, we'll look at 3 more of these strange wisdom words next week, and if you want, I'll have my sailor explain his story of each of those 3. And thank you for your attention tonight. God bless you, Brother James.